Empires build their power on two foundations: the strength of their armies and the power of forgetting. They want the conquered to forget their history, to forget their leaders, and to forget what it felt like to be free. For over 200 years, the Spanish Empire in South America had been brutally effective at enforcing this forgetting. The great Inca Empire was a distant memory, its descendants forced to labor for their new masters. The system seemed absolute, unshakable, eternal, but you can never truly kill an idea. And in the 1780s, the ghost of the last Inca emperor would return, embodied in a man who would rise up to challenge the Spanish Empire and ignite a fire that would burn across the Andes. His birth name was José Gabriel Condorcanqui, but the name he chose for himself would echo through history as a symbol of revolution: Túpac Amaru II. This is the epic, tragic, and inspiring story of the man who tried to break the chains of an empire. Our story begins not with a warrior, but with a nobleman. José Gabriel Condorcanqui lived a life of two worlds. He was a direct descendant, through his mother's line, of Túpac Amaru, the final Inca emperor, who had been publicly executed by the Spanish 2 centuries earlier. As such, he was a respected figure among the indigenous Andean communities, holding the title of curaca, or local leader, for several districts near the city of Cusco. But he was also a product of the colonial world. He was a mestizo of mixed heritage and had received a fine Jesuit education. He was a wealthy businessman running a successful trade network of mules across the Andes. He was, by all accounts, a respected member of the colonial elite. But his noble lineage and his position of authority gave him a front-row seat to the suffering of his people. He saw firsthand the devastating impact of the Spanish colonial system. At its heart was the brutal institution known as the mita. The mita was a system of mandatory public service, a twisted inheritance from the old Inca Empire. But under the Spanish, it had become a death sentence. Every indigenous community was forced to send a quota of its men to work in the silver mines, particularly the infamous mines of Potosi. The conditions were horrific. Men were forced to labor deep underground for weeks at a time, breathing toxic dust, carrying back-breaking loads, often never to return. The mita shattered families and depopulated entire regions. It was a system of slavery in all but name, designed to extract the mineral wealth of the Andes for the benefit of Spain. For years, Condorcanqui tried to fight this system from within. He was a reformer, not a revolutionary. He used his wealth and education to travel to Lima, the capital of the viceroyalty, to petition the Spanish authorities. He wrote letters, filed legal complaints, and argued eloquently for the abolition of the mita and an end to the crushing taxes imposed on his people. He believed in justice, he believed in the law, and he was ignored. His petitions were dismissed. The colonial officials, many of them corrupt and profiting from the system, treated him with contempt. The tipping point came with a particularly cruel and arrogant local Spanish governor, Antonio de Arriaga. Arriaga was infamous for his exploitation of the indigenous population. When Condorcanqui confronted him, Arriaga reportedly threatened him, mocking his Inca heritage. In that moment, Condorcanqui realized that the path of peace was a dead end. The system was not broken. It was working exactly as it was designed to. It would not be reformed. It had to be broken. On November 4th, 1780, the revolution began. Condorcanqui and his followers captured Governor Arriaga. He forced the governor to write letters demanding money and arms from the colonial treasury, which he then seized. Then, in the main plaza of the town of Tungasuka, he did the unthinkable. In front of a large crowd of indigenous people, he put Arriaga on trial for his crimes and publicly executed him. With this single dramatic act of defiance, Condorcanqui declared war. He cast off his Spanish name and fully embraced his Inca heritage. He was no longer José Gabriel Condorcanqui. He was Túpac Amaru II, the rightful heir to the Inca throne, returned to deliver his people from bondage. The news spread like wildfire through the Andes. For the first time in centuries, a powerful leader had stood up and successfully defied the Spanish. Indigenous communities, who had suffered in silence for generations, rose up to join him. What started as a small band of rebels exploded into a massive army. Tens of thousands of indigenous peasants, mestizos, and even some disaffected Creoles flocked to his banner. Túpac Amaru II's rebellion was initially stunningly successful. He issued proclamations abolishing the mita and the sales tax, winning him even more support. His army, though poorly equipped with farming tools, slings, and only a few firearms, overwhelmed the local militias. They won a key victory at the Battle of Sangarara, wiping out a Spanish force that had taken refuge in a local church. The Great Andean Rebellion was in full force. The ultimate prize was the ancient city of Cusco, the former heart of the Inca Empire. In early 1781, Túpac Amaru II and his army, now numbering over 40,000, laid siege to the city. It was a moment of immense symbolic power. The descendant of the Incas had returned to reclaim his capital. But here, the rebellion faltered. He hesitated to launch a full-scale assault, perhaps hoping the city would surrender without a bloody battle. This delay gave the Spanish time to fortify their defenses and bring in reinforcements. The siege failed, and this became the turning point of the war. The Spanish response was swift and brutal. They dispatched a massive, well-armed professional army from Lima. The rebel forces, despite their courage, were no match for the disciplined, trained soldiers of the Spanish Empire. The rebellion began to suffer a series of defeats. In the end, Túpac Amaru II was not defeated in battle, but brought down by betrayal. Two of his own commanders betrayed him to the Spanish in exchange for a pardon. He was captured, along with his wife, Micaela Bastidas, a brilliant and powerful revolutionary leader in her own right, and his children. The Spanish were determined not just to punish him, but to make an example of him so terrifying that no one would ever dare to rebel again. In the main plaza of Cusco, the very same plaza where the Spanish had executed his ancestor, they prepared one of the most gruesome public spectacles in colonial history. First, they forced Túpac Amaru to watch the execution of his eldest son, his wife, and his other key lieutenants. Then, they brought him to the center of the plaza. They tied his limbs to 4 horses, intending to have him drawn and quartered. The horses pulled, but his body would not tear apart. In a final horrific act, the executioners beheaded him and dismembered his body. His head was placed on a pike in Cusco. His limbs were sent to the 4 corners of the viceroyalty, a chilling warning to anyone who dreamed of freedom. The Spanish had killed the man, but they had failed to kill the idea. The brutality of the execution backfired. Instead of terrorizing the population into submission, it turned Túpac Amaru II into a martyr and a legend. His rebellion, though crushed, had exposed the deep cracks in the foundation of the Spanish Empire. The name Túpac Amaru became a powerful symbol, a rallying cry for justice and independence that would echo through the Andes for decades to come. His uprising was the bloody precursor to the great wars of independence that would erupt a generation later. Leaders like Simón Bolívar would fight under the same banner of freedom that he had raised. The Great Andean Rebellion had failed, but it had shown that the mighty Spanish Empire was not invincible. It proved that the memory of freedom, even after centuries of oppression, could never truly be extinguished. If you believe these are the true stories of resistance that need to be told, subscribe to History and Beyond and join us as we continue to challenge the official narrative.